We are going to be having a visit with one of our good friends, Beverly Fell Jones, pretty soon, because she's going to be sharing with us a book that she wrote about the one command, the law of attraction, and how all of this teaching works in with some of the Christian beliefs. Now, I want to talk about that for just a second as we're going to be talking about, let me actually just come back to this picture for a moment. Right now, as we're going to be uncovering our beliefs, as you have your set of beliefs that you have as an adult that you've come to know and understand. And maybe you have some different ideas about God and religion and spirituality than you had when you were a kid. Maybe you were a kid like me. You know, I grew up in the Bible Belt here in, right in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. And I got some scars to prove it, so it kind of caught me sometime. And we weren't a real religious family. We were, spiritual. We liked church and community. And frankly, I think my mom kind of saw church as a way to get us kids out of the house on Sunday morning. When they were working, it was something for us to do. We had vacation Bible school. And in Texas, religion is the main way, church is the main way to socialize. And if you meet people from the South or you go to the South, it doesn't take long for them to find out and, to ask you, do you go to church? What church do you go to? Maybe they'll even ask you if you're saved. They have no compunction. I was actually on the phone with a distributor one time in Atlanta, and she said, well, while I got you on the phone, can I just ask you right quick, have you heard the good news? And I went, oh, yeah, I'm from Texas. I've heard that news. Thank you. But that is just so much in our culture, but it's not necessarily that way other places. So I just want you to know that I come from that background, but as an adult, I got to explore many religions and teachings and got to really explore a lot of different practices. And so as the older I've gotten, I've kind of realized that as I was this kid sitting in these different churches, and we moved so much, the church we went to was called the First Church down the street. It wasn't necessarily Baptist or Presbyterian or anything else. We went to the closest one and the one where we might have had friends. And I just have to say, too, that growing up in the South, they had this thing called hot dog suppers, and it used to be socially acceptable for people coming from the church, get in their car, ride into a neighborhood and see kids and go, hey, we're having a hot dog supper. Do you want to go? And the kid would hop in a car and go. And without asking their parents or anything else, and it was okay to go to church. When we had lost Sandy more than once. She would just disappear not knowing where she was, and turned out she was at a hot dog supper. Hey. Free hot dogs. I mean, it just was like, it's so much in our grain of our fabric. But as a kid, I remember sitting there and thinking, especially when I got to sit in the big church and there'd be all this hell and damnation or anger and judgment. Hey, where's that Jesus that loves us? Where's that guy that, when I'm singing Jesus loves me, this I know, where was that feeling? Because as a kid, I really had a spiritual bend, and there was just a way I kind of was in relationship with nature. It was peaceful. There was beauty. I just loved being out there, and I could just imagine laying back in the clover, looking up at the clouds, talking to God. And I really had the feeling that God talked back to me. And that's just how I lived, and it was not unacceptable. And then later I grew up, I got to have experiences with more of the spirit-filled type of churches that really believed in gifts of the Spirit. Now we call it intuition, but they believed in hands-on healing and word of wisdom, word of knowledge. And there was a lot of activation of a lot of my spiritual gifts, and a lot of my healing abilities came in through that vein. But then I understood, too, that it was not what I got inside of the church. It was the space that I was occupying and the relationship that I wanted to be with who I perceived God to be at the time, okay? So we had this idea about this, but a lot of people, when we talk about God programs and religion, there's a lot of wounding there. And when we talk to people that are healers, I have met so many people that really felt abandoned by God. They might feel angry. Now, there's some people that don't believe in an intelligence called God, and I actually understand that. And there's this greater intelligence, and I think that for us to say God is actually too small a word, because our idea about God is too small, and it's greater. And so I just want to this is kind of up, and I need to address this, okay, before we move forward. Had a lady that called the One Command Center, who was a preacher from Tennessee. So I used to be a Bible teacher, so I knew exactly how to talk to her. And she's wanting to know what our religious beliefs are, and what is Asara a Christian? And she's not. Asara is more of a Sufi Buddhism type of practices, that type of thing. And that's no secret. And she was really wanting to know, and I was like, really, what does that have to do with anything? And she was talking. She says, it seems to be working, but I'm kind of freaked out. Am I commanding and ordering God around? I'm like, no, you're really not. This is a technique. And I said, in the Bible it talks about the mind of Christ. And she said, yes. And I said, and that's that greater intelligence. That's what we're talking about. That's separate from your ego. That's separate from that own voice. That has all the wisdom and knowledge. And I said, that's what that's referring to. We're not giving a code name for that. That is more of a way that you understand what this greater intelligence inside of you is. That part of you that is loving, accepting, generous, that is in mastery, that knows what all this is about and is able to see the bigger picture. Okay? And I said, but what keeps you from being in relationship with that is your ego. You think about the things that you should be doing and you ought to be doing, and maybe you're sinful, or maybe you didn't try hard enough, maybe you didn't have enough faith, and maybe that's why you didn't get what you needed or wanted. And she says, I just want to love God. I just want to be good. I want to serve God, but my physical needs aren't being met. And God promised everything. And I said, well, it's your beliefs about what God will and won't do and your relationship that's keeping that separate. And so I do work with a lot of people of all different faiths and beliefs, but I just said, with the One Command, this is not to replace your religion. You don't have to give up any idea that you have about God and Jesus, the Holy Spirit, salvation, what that means. That is your relationship. And this is a structure, an archetype that we honor. And we honor in all religions and all persuasions, and even people that aren't persuaded. We want you to think about this as a technique. And this technique is the way to calm all of those programs and those fears, because your first representation of God was your mother and your father. They were the big God outside of you, and those are the programs that are stopping you. But I want to come back to this idea of the technique. Imagine that you were having a panic attack, and that in order to calm yourself for the panic attack, your strategy is to make sure that you breathe into a little paper bag. And she says, I understand that. I actually have panic attacks. I know what that is. And it's interesting, I chose that as the metaphor, right? I said, so imagine you're having a panic attack, and you're reaching around, you're looking for it, and there's someone standing there, and they hand you a paper bag, and they tell you to take your 4 breaths in, hold your breath, take your 4 breaths out, focus on your breathing, and allow the carbon monoxide and the oxygen mix to begin to reduce a little bit so that you're not overloading your brain and your lungs and your heart. Good. And just allow yourself to settle back into your body. And then you feel calmer, and you hand the bag back. And she said, yeah, that's exactly how it happens. And I said, great. I said, where was Jesus in that experience? Because she kept asking me where Jesus is in the teaching. And I said, where was Jesus in that experience? Was he there in the need? Was he there in the moment that someone handed you the bag? Was he there in the moment there was the relief? Was it the invention of the bag, the invention of the technique? And she said, gosh, I don't know. And I said, well, see, I don't know where God is not. And so what we're doing is we're allowing you to come into this greater expansion of accepting and being in this relationship and knowing that your needs are met and clearing those needs, those unmet needs in the past, and through meeting ourselves with love and compassion. But the things that are stopping us is sometimes we have unforgiveness, we have unresolved anger or resentment about things that happened in the past. And this is what we want to help you with. So I took her through some commands, and she felt calm, and she said, you know, I get it now. I was really afraid that I was going to be sinful. She asked if I said, I bet you kind of walk around with that feeling all the time anyway, that you're doing something wrong and you're going to get punished. She said, yeah. And I said, what would it be like to live without that feeling of being wrong and holding your breath and waiting for the punishment to arrive? How many times are you punishing yourself because of something, some mistake you made? And this shuts you down from the future, because then your life becomes about avoiding mistakes. And it doesn't become about being in the full expression of your truth. You know, imagine being a parent. And Neil Donald Walsh in Conversations with God talked about this. And in the book it talks about where in this conversation that he had with God, because he was so mad, he finally just started writing one day, and then he noticed something was writing back. And in the conversations it was, what am I supposed to do? What is my purpose? How am I supposed to express? And God said, you know, if you were to take your kids to the playground, Neil's representation of God, okay, take your kids to the playground. Would it matter to you if they were on the slides or the merry-go-round or the swings or the teeter-totter, or if they just decided to run around, or if they were, you know, on the jungle gym? You would want your kids just to get out there and play and have fun. And that's what I want for you. And she got that. She'd been doing all these things to be a good person, and it was causing her more and more pain and separation. Well, we are going to be addressing this stuff today, because these feelings are the things that are really stopping you from coming into that space of where there is more than enough, where all your needs are met, and you can face that in confidence. Okay? So let me switch over to the full screen. It is bothering me so much to see my background. There we go. Thank you. Because I keep looking at myself talk. And I'm kind of a boring person to me. I look at myself all the time. And by now, you should have your manual printed out. And we really need to think about, you know, meeting our resentments and judgments. And do I have my manual here? I want to tell you what page that is. I have mine on my desktop. And I didn't really want to go print out the 35 pages. And I'm going to zoom to my actual size so I can get to this. And we're actually going to go to page 15 of your manual if you have it handy. And like I said, I just pulled mine up on my desktop so I can take a look at it. And I saw it's got a little writing about the Mystery School of Cash. And we're going to meet some of these programs, page 15, about what we, about who we resent, what happened, when they did it, what did we lose or prevent it from being doing, and what do you wish would have happened instead. Now, this is best done with a partner because you get to tell the story, but, for the purposes of the webinar, we're going to do this exercise on our own. Okay. This is 11 a.m. now. Okay, thank you. All right, so we have about an hour and a half before lunch, right? Thank you. All right. So what this is to really think about this, and you're going to start noticing there's a pattern here, but we don't want you to do any clearing yet. And this is your chance to really think about who did you wrong, who took from you. And let me just give you an example, since it's you and I talking here. I was thinking about, I was actually going through a period where I was just going, man, I'm just ready to really clear and go to the next level with my money. So sick of not having money. I'm ready to have money. And I've got to get the decks cleared here. And so I started asking myself, what resentments could be holding me up? And resentments are so tricky because it starts out first as a little feeling. And it could start out with something like, someone asked you to do something that you really didn't want to do, but you did it anyway, right? But then there wasn't, there wasn't any energy that came back to you, or maybe even worse, it turned out wrong. And then this sets you up for resentment and then blame. And so one situation that I realized that I had was, I realized I had put myself in a position that I was helping people without really any clear agreements. And I hadn't even thought about this person or anything else. It was someone who was in a relationship with my daughter that all through the relationship, in order to be supportive, trying to help my daughter, I actually wound up giving so much to this person, starting with giving them a job and then going and buying the tools for them so they could do the job. And then they needed a car for this, and I helped them to buy a car, and then that car didn't work. And so on this job that I had given him, and they lived on the same property I did. He was working for me at apartments. I was going out of town, and said, well, can we borrow the car? I said, yeah, I really go to the store. I don't want you out in it much. It was kind of a new car. And I said, but listen, you're going to be on call, but if there's anything like plumbing or a flood or anything like that, I want you to call this particular vendor, and they're going to take care of it. You're really not qualified. And besides that, we get to bill that back to the resident rather than it being your overtime. And he said, okay. So I go out of town, and first thing that happens, there's a flood, someone's sink or washing machine, something overflows. They get the page, and it turns out they are visiting a friend. They've driven 30 miles out of town to go visit this friend, and they decide they need to hurry up and get back to the property where the flood was happening. It was pouring rain, and because he was hurrying, he wound up having an accident in my new car. And then in the new car, I had my $500 deductible. They didn't have the money to pay it. And then the passenger that was in the car wound up suing my insurance for $25,000 for the injuries that was involved. And then it canceled my insurance. So there's a little story, but when did it happen? 5 years ago. Who did it to you? Scott. Scott did it. What did they do? Scott wrecked my car, but more than that, Scott kept, it was always like every time I wanted to help him, it would cost me more and more. And so what did I lose or were prevented from having, being, and doing? Well, I lost my insurance. I lost the use of my car. I lost really some trust, and it caused some problems between my daughter and I because Scott and I got into a disagreement. So this kind of set up some things between my daughter and I, just saying, look, this is what's right. This is what I told you, and now I need you to, pay the money on the deductible. We made the deal that if you use the car and anything happens, you have to pay the deductible. You knew that. And so they didn't pay it. And then I never really thought about what do I wish would have happened instead. I wish, one, that I had never loaned them the car, but two, I wish that I had really set up clear agreements and clear boundaries up front. And that I had the ability to say no, that I hadn't tried to manage everything for everyone, and let, if someone wasn't able to do something, just say sorry. When you're able to get your tools together, let's talk about a job, and let him be the adult. He was like 25 years old, so he wasn't a child. So I do wish I could have treated him like an adult that set clear boundaries, and I really wish it hadn't happened. Okay, so that's kind of how that goes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pause the meeting recording, and we are going to take 15 minutes. Right now it's just about right on the hour. It's 10:59, and we're going to take 15 minutes for you to write these out. Now what happens is this memory will do another one, and I'd actually like for you to come back to this exercise and write as many of these as you can. But the first time may take you a little longer, but let's see how many of these we get in. So you're going to have a piece of paper. You're going to answer these questions about who you resent. So I'm going to stop the recording now, and then I'm going to put on some music just so that you know that I'm still here, and then we'll be coming back. Thank you.